Hello, everyone. Nice to be here, to be virtually in Venice. It's the first time. First time I'm doing that. So a little intro about myself. I have a PhD in biology and computer science, what we call bioinformatics, and I'm specialized in the DNA of cancer. And these days I'm doing MFA and MA in Tel Aviv also. And what Doron asked me to tell you is that I'm a dancer. I'm coming from dance and photography. Many years I danced butoh, and I'm still dancing, but little bit less, and contact improvisation and Gaga. And most of the language are improvisation, which I really like. So my creation in art really connected most of the time to body in different ways. And in this project, what I try to do is to find the real connection, what connect me between science and art. And what we you can see here is a work that I'm calling 1 kilo, and it's a sculpture from DNA, from strawberry DNA. And basically, what I'm doing, I'm taking the strands of the DNA. I'm extracting them from the strawberry itself, and I'm drying only the DNA and creating sculptures from it. So what you see here is the first time that I did it, that I created this new materiality. Um, and the first time when I just extracted the DNA, I didn't know what to do with it. It looked like skin. It looked like when it was wet. And after I dried it, I understood that, okay, I have here a really material that I can work with, that I create something from it. So this piece was the original piece, the first that I did. And the reason that I chose strawberry is very interesting, because strawberry was the symbol to Maria, um, in the old days, in the Middle Age, because strawberry was considered as a hermaphrodite. That means that it has a self um, reproducing system, or maybe I'm not saying it right, but like Reviat Smith, if you can help me with that, or someone.
Self-reproduction.
Yeah, self-reproduction system. And it doesn't have he and she, only the hermaphrodite. And and in the last century, science realized that strawberry did have uh, male and female, and there is an actually sex. So since the last century, Maria is not painted with the strawberry as a symbol. So it used to be a symbol of pureness. Now it's a symbol of sex, and that's why I chose to create the new materiality from the strawberry. So after I created this cube, I started to play with it and created my self-portraits. What you can see here, I printed, uh, I scanned my face with a 3D camera, and then I printed it, and I used it as a mold so I can recreate my face with the DNA of the strawberry, and also I mix it with my spit, but with extracted DNA from my spit, not just with my spit. Um, so what we can see here is just samples from a video work that is presented in Venice nowadays, in different ways that I explored out of an egg, like in a mirror, different kind that I really try to understand what I really feel connected to. And I want to show you another work that that it's a sculpture that nowadays, wait, um, is presented in Venice. This is the baby. It's a doll, like few years ago when I started to explore this, I didn't have a child, and I didn't have a relationship, and didn't have a future, even not just I couldn't plan it. And so I decided to create my own baby. So what you can see here is yeah, it's funny, huh? Nowadays it has different yeah, other connections also in Israel. But yeah, so this creation is I used the same technique as I explained with my face. I scanned, I used the mold as the original doll. I used as the mold, and then I dried the DNA on this. Yeah, and I have many other sculptures that I did from this. I started with the strawberry DNA, then I moved to human DNA. I created a community of 150 people that I created a sculpture from their DNA. And I think this is what I have to say about the DNA. This project is continuing, and also continuing to what I'm presenting now in the exhibition in parallel. Maybe I can show you also one piece that me and Doron talked about that is very related to this project. I will just it actually the work. Um, this is the work. You can see my arm that I engraved on my arm the question, how do I explain to my daughter? Um, Daughter and home in Hebrew, we use the same word, which is beiti. It's not the same word, but it's the same character, and if it's not spelled right, you can be confused. So
That's
in
the new
this,
title of your show now in Tel Aviv.
yeah, yeah, exactly. This is the name of the exhibition that I'm now just presenting, and this is a long video of 30 minutes. What you can see here is the letters of the question is here in the middle of my arm, and you can't see that the moment that I'm engraving it, but what you can see is that my skin react very quick and became red, and along the video it's you can't really see it anymore. It's like it changing. You have a memory of the character, so you still can read it here after 30 minutes, but you can't really read it if you didn't know what is there. So it's also talking about skin, and they're related to language. um yes,
This is a language that, or at least a writing that will diminish with time, actually in very short period of time,
yeah,
unless you scratch yourself very hard.
yeah,
So,
I use a needle for it, yeah.
yeah. So you actually activate a lot of substances within the different layers of the skin in order to enable that sentence to appear.
Yeah,
It's quite a long process or chain of events that are going on after you just apply pressure or actually pressure to your skin, and this is causing a sort of a visual translation of what you intended.
yeah,
Is a brilliant example how one stimulus can lead to totally different one. This is brilliant. Now, suppose you were able to influence the genetic code of that
hmm,
chain of events, like
yeah,
playing, sort of, to speak with the DNA or the
yeah,
RNA or whatever that enable those substances to appear and act.
yeah,
You think you would like to play on it, to play on the code like in open code applications, and start writing on one's skin different sentences.
Nice idea.
Is it possible?
That's crazy. You are asking me to do the reverse engineering from the metabolites or RNA or the DNA. It's I guess that if we will explore it, really explore it, we will figure out how to do it. It's a nice question. I don't know how to answer it right now, but
I'll just carry on. I mean, you
yeah,
can
yeah, of course.
suppose it's possible, then you can create the hidden ingredients of a tattoo message that will appear once someone applies pressure. You don't need any more needles and inks and all the industry. Just simply create a change in the DNA of a human being or whatever, and by pressure, different messages will start to appear on our skins.
Yeah, actually, that's yeah.
It's very
You know,
interesting.
it reminds me when we were kids in school at class, and when we studied for the exams, and we wanted to cheat the teachers, we were used to write on our hands the secrets of the answers of the quiz. And it was hidden when we came to the classroom. It was with us on our body, so we were reading immediately. Erasing,
if someone could transmit it for you, you can transmit the answers. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. Or maybe that was the system at that time.
Just throw in another idea. Suppose in the morgue, Stephan, once you apply pressure to a cadaver, the story of the last minutes and who was responsible for the departure will appear instead of writing blood on the floor.
I think, Dror, I think it's very interesting. Of course, the tattoo part of it. I'm here in New York, where almost everyone, grandparents, grandchildren, everyone has tattoos. So it's very, very common. And of course, there are as many tattoo removal stores as well. So I like that idea that a tattoo is a kind of a message that you want to broadcast to the world. But in this instance, the message it has a brevity, a kind of secrecy to it that it's only available for a short amount of time. And I Doron, like you say, like I wrote things on various body parts. I would write with lemon on paper, and then you heat it up and there's a chemical reaction and you could see the message and then it disappears. So I like that idea that it's a temporary kind of time-specific broadcast that's available to, well, I'm not sure who at this point, but for a certain amount of time only, and then it's gone. So the ephemerality is very, I think, very powerful.
It's true. Just one word about you. Dror, is the birth of your daughter lately concerning the audience here in our show is behind me. Your sculpture.
Yeah.
No matter, we didn't write specific the title of the work. We just wrote the name of the creators. But know that everybody who observed it said that it's about birth.
Yeah.
So here you are. It works.
Yeah. Yeah.
May I ask another question? I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to say that it's really when we are talking about it now, and there is the baby in one side of the world in Venice, and this work is now here, and this really two different categories of me, like without a kid, just dreaming about this idea and trying to create it by myself, and me after a few years in a relationship with a kid in the other room, 5 months, and yeah, it's really exciting, this connection now. So thank you for this. The extensions,
extension.
Yeah.
It is extensions. Stephan, go ahead. Go. It's free.
No, There was something you mentioned a moment ago about a previous piece where you collected multiple samples from
Yeah,
different people.
yeah,
And just, at the moment here, I'm trying to kind of oversee the archive of a colleague that passed away a year and a half ago and sort of secure his legacy of art and protect it. And, archives are they require a tremendous amount of effort. So I was thinking about that piece, and of course, no artist ever wants to really think, or no human wants to think about their afterlife legacy and securing their artwork. We're all too busy in the present.
yeah,
But boy, if a piece like that, comprised of many different genetic strands and samples, has to be secured in some way or preserved, let's say in a museum collection, it not only brings up all the issues of artistic preservation, but then the kind of ethical issues where, I mean, there are people that are, harvesting eggs or DNA so that should technology catch up, in the future, they could be, reconstituted. So what an interesting sort of dilemma for an archivist down the line to receive your piece and be told you need to protect this and care for it. And what does that really mean?
yeah, yeah, you're right. I worked with a lawyer to
Mm,
create a contract for the people who participated in the exhibition. What you see here, what I shared with you now is the community of the 150 people. This is a cube 4 by 4 square centimeters with each of the patches there is a different person, and I don't know those person. I met them in the street randomly, and I asked them to spit. I gave them a salt water and asked them to and then to
mm,
spit it back to me, and I told them that I'm creating something for art, if they mind to give it to me, and they gave it. And during the exhibition, I have this contract that I asked from everyone who is come entering the gallery. They're taking responsibility for not hurting the community, this community of DNA, which is
mm,
exactly what you said, Stephan. We These were very, very interesting questions about like how to preserve, and can I do it with it? And this was also very interesting to see when art is before the science and before the law and before like other stuff, because as an artist I can do this how you say la cough um I,
Surround, to surround.
I can come first before, and then other people can ask the question. I don't need to answer them. I can also ask them, but I don't need to answer them. And actually, I don't know nowadays this community. I keep it. People wanted to buy it, for example, this piece.
mm.
People wanted to buy it, and I didn't know what to do. I
Yeah.
didn't know. Wait, I don't want to sell it. And yeah, many interesting question about this sculpture.
I think there's an artist, I haven't thought about this artist in a while, but the artist Mark Quinn,
Yeah,
who,
of
With
drew
the
course.
out.
blood, with the blood, with the head, with the
Yeah,
Yeah, I
statue.
mean that
You
brings
know
up
him,
the whole issue
right?
of stewardship, of care
yeah,
Precisely.
on the collector, whoever that might be. And then of course the idea that you own an artwork which is comprised of this person's genetic material. So on some level, you do quite literally own a part of this human, and how that contractually is limited or not to uses in perpetuity is really fascinating and murky and wild territory for artists and legal scholars and humans alike. So really intriguing. What your piece is bringing up all of this, of course.
It's not exactly a wild and uncharted area. I mean,
Well, it's wild in my mind, but it's actually transpiring now. So I guess it's almost the everyday now. But
you can think about the presentation exhibitions of mummies in museums, or stuffed animals or stuffed creatures. Then you, actually those artworks or samples or displays are comprised of genetic materials as well.
Right.
Also nowadays we are dealing a lot with bioart. Bioart is all about inserting, evolving and reproducing creatures like fungi and mushrooms within the museal space. So it's here now, and we allow it while dealing with DNA specifically, or RNA, or genetic materials harvested from people or humans or animals in the framework of scientific work has a lot of limitations, as Dror explained. And this brings the question of art and science cooperation or non-cooperation. I mean, should scientists who are dealing with genetic materials and are being trained to be very cautious, should they let the artists do whatever they like, and even have a bio-art exhibition that will lead to a break or spread of a new epidemic?
Yeah.
Well, actually, Duchamp dealt the first one with the temporal works, you know. We had it along the history. It's not that new. All the recycled materials, they are not existing for a long time. So, you know, I mean, we develop it, but the question of having it for a long time or existence, it's an open question. It's a debate. We could relate to it, but it's a good question. Concerning the skin, it's a real, yeah. Okay. Dror, did you complete your presentation?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, then thank you so much.
No,
It was
thank
great.
you.
And we shall pass by to Stephan, I guess. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So when Doron, when you asked me to pull together something on this topic, I decided to go into the deep archives and pull out work that I sort of haven't been engaged with in quite some time.
Stephan, 1 minute, just say 2 words about who you are and what you're doing.
Who am I?
Yeah, of course. No, not everybody knows.
Sure, no, of course. I hope nobody knows. I mean, that's my objective, is to become I'm a guy who's waking up in Brooklyn, New York right now, hence the coffee. My name is Stephan Apicella-Hitchcock. I'm the head of the visual arts department at Fordham University. I've been there for 28 years, and I was born a half mile that way over in Manhattan. So that's who I am. And this project goes, I mean, this body of work, if you will, goes way back. So I'm starting here in the late 80s. Initially, when I was in undergraduate school, I was interested in documentary photography. I still am. My background and my training is all in photography. And I spent a lot of time working in veterans' homes when I was in my, early 20s. And it was sort of my first foray into photography. And I think I was in way over my head, in the sense that I was a young person trying to learn about photography and also negotiating an area that was highly unfamiliar to me. I think I was drawn to this place because I never knew any of my grandparents, and so I had this no connection with 2 generations sort of above me. And of course, it was a place where I was not privileged to all the communication that was transpiring. I would sometimes be in a room of men, and they would be communicating in a kind of non-linguistic fashion. And I was the one who was the outsider. But it was very interesting. This individual here on the right, I wound up having a quite close relationship with this man on the right, John Davis. And through many, many weeks of conversation, I realized this man is completely lucid. He's really tack sharp. He's really smart, on the ball, together. And over time, I petitioned, and he was released from the hospital, and he got a small apartment and was living on his own, which was really quite nice. And I used to visit him. But when I went later to graduate school, I think this interest in having some level of connection with an older generation was very powerful within me. And I met people that were sort of tucked away in these old age homes that had sent telegrams and rode horses and, listened to radio dramas rather than watch TV shows. And they were in the Olympics. And there's all these kind of incredible, this wealth of knowledge and human experience that was sort of, if you will, parceled out and outsourced to old age homes. And in a way, I think in the modern world, there is no culturally normative response to aging and death. We're highly uncomfortable with the prospect of all this. So we often outsource it to some other specialist, whether it be, homes or funeral homes or any of these things. So I continued this, and of course, the natural extension was that it brought me to hospitals and morgues, and I was really surprised in that my curiosity, I thought, would be met with skepticism, and we're going back now in graduate school to the early mid 90s, so I'm not sure how this would go over today. Whether it would be seen as kind of more grotesque or gruesome. But at that time, I thought there's no way I'm going to get invited into any of these places. And I said I had my argument how I'm very interested in the process of death and dying and the world of death and dying and the world of care and hospice. And they were very casual. They're like, maybe it's just the people that I met. They said, come on in. They greeted my curiosity with open arms, which was really wonderful. And of course, the first time that I went into a morgue and saw a autopsy, it was a priest. And I, thought, my gosh, when they open up the body, it's going to be an explosion, not unlike, the opening of the Ark of the Covenant in Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's going to be something incredibly dramatic. And of course, it wasn't. It was visceral. It was intense. And then what's most interesting when I look back to that time period is that going there with regularity, that drama became normalized, as it does for anybody that works within the sort of profession. So I spent years going and working with these doctors. The chief of neuropathology was serving on my thesis committee. The chief medical examiner for the state of Rhode Island was serving on my thesis committee as well, in addition to artists and photographers. And one thing that really struck me is that when a person passes away, their last personal artifacts are bagged and often brought down with the body to the morgue until the body could be sort of transported out to the next stage, whether that be burial or cremation. What's that?
Smell as well?
It smelled as well? Yes. Oh, yes. No. So these bags, I would find them sometimes, they were left over. I mean, they are completely unimportant in the sense that it's socks and shoes and underpants. So it's the most quotidian details of everyday existence. But for me, the fact that they were the last elements that were in relationship to this person before they transitioned from the here and now into the great beyond, they were really quite charged. And I would open up these bundles and photograph the different elements with a kind of simple style. And it was, you're right. They had the odor, not unpleasant, but the smell of another human, whatever their pheromones were. And standing before these artifacts, it was a very unusual, it was a very intimate portrait situation, although in absentia, the human was not there, but their trace, their relic was there, very present, which was really intriguing. I not only I felt very strongly, I volunteered in the hospital and in the medical examiner's office. So I wasn't just photographing, they had me doing things, which is giving me a lot of kind of background information about the process of what these individuals do on a regular basis. So one of the tasks that I had was, at the end of every 6 months or so, they had to sort of deaccession their pathology samples and burn them. So every 6 months, I would have to take out the batch that had expired and kind of take these little sample containers and pour them through a spaghetti strainer to collect the formalin, which is the preservative, and then separate out these little bits and bobs and pieces to go to the incinerator. These were things that were taken, maybe they're gallstones, maybe they're tissue pathology samples, etc. And after a day of doing this, in addition to kind of, being a little bit high from the smell of the formalin, I found myself being slightly melancholy from just this rather gruesome process of sifting through. And I always tried to just imagine, well, this is not unlike a New York City subway where we have one person from there and one person from there. And there's a kind of democracy in that they're all living together now. But I would make little messages to myself out of the little residue in order to kind of bolster my spirits and make myself smile before these elements got put into the incinerator. So sometimes it was, abstract representations of the body. Sometimes it was quite literal. And then, of course, the environment itself and the tools of the morgue and the medical examiner office, for me, were very, very intriguing. And the photographer Walker Evans did a wonderful series for Fortune magazine, in the 20th century, of the tools of the working person. And I thought they were very kind of beautiful, austere, simple, direct pictures. So I started to photograph these tools and wanted them to sort of be as lovely, as simple, as beautiful, as austere as possible. And what I liked about the results was that when I've shown these, they don't immediately broadcast the fact that they are from the context of taking apart humans for an autopsy. So in a way, it circumvents, when you show someone a picture of a body, there's very little response aside from kind of shock and horror. But with these, it's an elliptical way of starting a conversation about that process, about something that most of us probably don't have all that much experience with, up to a point when we start to have family passing away. And then, of course, usually we try as best we can to kind of pretend that it's not even happening, right? So the tools were a nice way to sort of step away from the bodies. And of course, the environment itself is really fascinating. It's not unlike a place where you would bring an automobile to get, a kind of muffler changed. The people that work there are absolutely wonderful. I found that just by and large, the people that tend to work in this environment have a great sense of humor, really funny people. On one level, it's shocking to be there, but for them, it's their regular job. They wake up every day and that's what they do. So they have to be like doctors. They have to be somewhat matter of fact about it. They have to be somewhat insulated. I would see a bundle and, my heart would start pounding. I'd start thinking and becoming emotional. Of course, they can't be like that for every body that comes through. Otherwise, they would be an emotional wreck by Friday night. So this is made with a large format 8x10 camera made of 4 different panels. And although it presents itself as a panorama of a single moment, each one of these frames had to be shot. Then I had to break down the camera and move it out because an autopsy was transpiring. Then when the autopsy was done, I moved the camera back into as close as the position that I could remember what it was supposed to be at. So although there's nothing moving here and there are no people, the sort of almost the integers between the photographs are permeated with red and frenetic activity and sound, which is very, very visceral and intense. So I like, again, that this is something in this particular time period where there were no actual bodies, but that sense of the presence or the body in absentia was quite there. So, I measured everything in the morgue. I started going there on a regular basis, and everything in there was fascinating to me. It's not a part of this presentation, but at one point, some other kids, younger than me, I was, in my 20s, I guess, some high school kid they had a relative that worked in the hospital and they started coming down there and they immediately found a stash of pornography in one of the shelves. And I thought, oh my God, the connection between sex and death is quite literal. And so only here in this context will I show something like this. I don't exhibit things like this, but in this sort of forum here, I could talk about the fact that one day I would go into the morgue and there would be a head on one of these sort of stainless steel shelves. And how does one take that in? What is the reasoning behind this? And of course, recently when I was in Rome teaching this summer and I spent a lot of time in Naples, I found a really great sort of medical pathology museum in Naples, and the card that sort of introduces you to this wonderful space says, listen, some of these things are shocking. There's no way that a modern audience can really know how to take this in. But you have to remember, there was a time before photography, right, in the 1830s or so. And this is, how doctors learned about anatomy was from bodies and things in jars and flayed pieces of forearm to understand musculature. So I didn't think of it at the time, but somebody once said, it's almost like some kind of, and what do I know about Buddhism? But there's some kind of a Buddhist meditation about the devolving and the falling away of one's own body to contemplate their mortality. So I think in my 20-year-old way, I was trying to confront the prospects of my own mortality. And of course, my parents were both still alive at that point. So there's a giant sort of mystery. But I like the idea of, again, methodically studying something from every angle. And then, of course, in this case, you would put it out there and allow people to arrive at some of their own conclusions. So balancing out a kind of sterility with a kind of shock and trying to find some spot in the middle that's not overtly offensive, that turns people off immediately. And of course, sometimes I would find things like pictures, in this case, a Polaroid of a young child, and I'm not going to show it. I have no interest. What would be the point of showing it? Imagine if I ever had an exhibition with this picture and someone related to the kid walked in the space. That would be the horror of all horrors, to confront some parent with something like this. So it's been a process. What's that?
Sorry to disturb. Can you go back one slide? What is the lower row?
The lower element is the headrest. The autopsy
you put the head on this.
Yeah, that is photographed in parallel with the transition of that. So during an autopsy, that will be underneath the head on the table as they start to explore the skull and open up the skull and do the sort of brain pathology. For me, it reminded me quite clearly of either Egyptian or Japanese Heian era sort of the sort of wonderful, makoras or pillows that they had made of wood, which I found quite beautiful. I actually even think that headrest is a kind of beautiful, sort of object in and of itself. It looks like it could be a kind of quasi Donald Judd sculpture of sorts. But yes. If we have, this is just a couple, I'm sorry, what's that?
No, just a brief remark, that headrest,
yes.
in the operating room, we use different headrests depending on the kind of surgery we want to do on one's head. So there is a wide selection of headrests which are designed very nicely and very practically. So there is a charm in headrests.
Yeah, the tools are, and the place, the environment is quite extraordinary. And oddly enough, I'll get off of that image for a moment. At the end of the day, all the, again, the people that I worked with there were extremely supportive, and they give the one thing the chief pathologist started saying to me all the time is like, why are you going to art school and getting an MFA? It seems like you want to be a doctor. They really were kind of pushing me. And I said, well, thank you for the compliment. And I am very interested in medicine, but I think I like the working hours of an MFA student more than I do the working hours of like an intern, trying to get their degrees. But I did start, as a service, transferring one of the chief of neuropathology was formerly a chief pathologist for this in Austin, Texas, I believe. And he had this massive archive of all the, murder and mayhem and suicides that had transpired in Texas when he was in charge. And I was, I walked right into this. I said, like, oh boy, this is an amazing collection. And you've got them in these slide pages that are just totally not archival. They're going to destroy the color balance of your picture. He said, oh, well, would you help me out if I bought the materials for you and kind of get it into something that's archival? And I said, okay, sure. And I remember for 3 days straight, I was transferring image after image from his archive, which had an indexical file of the specifics of what the image represented. And after 3 days of red and red and red and murder and mayhem and all the kind of horrors that we as humans perpetrate to one another and ourselves, I finally hit one image that sort of broke me. And it's so interesting that it wasn't anything that even included a body. It was somebody that decided that their life had no more meaning and they wanted to end it. And they wrote a last note to their friends or family or something in a public park, left the note on a table, and they had hung themselves. And then it had started to rain, and the note had blurred. And it was just a piece of paper with these blurry ink splotches, and that was part of the evidence of this case. And I saw that, and I snapped. So it was, it's interesting what you think will be upsetting and what winds up being upsetting is really often quite different. So expectations. So I have some stills here, and I'll just show you maybe just a brief clip, but I recall I was in graduate school. So again, I was having a great time. And I remember one time coming into the morgue to do my work, and I was very hungover from like a, Friday night party or something. And I just decided like, all right, I'll drop and do some push-ups to try to get my blood flowing and get my hangover over. And boy, suddenly the awareness of my own physicality in the context of this kind of lifeless place became quite manifest. So I started to have routines that on the left is just a grid of different shots from the movie that I'll show you a clip of in a moment, where I tried to explore my fine and gross motor skills in the context of the morgue as studio. So in a way, I think there's a little bit of kind of a Bruce Nauman-esque sense of using one's own body as a sort of a vehicle. So fine motor skills being, opening and closing the buttons on my short shirt, or gross motor skills, holding out a bucket with a head in it for as long as possible, knocking a roll of surgical tape around the floor. And then on the right, and this was a 2-channel video that showed both pieces simultaneously, I found pathology sample bottles that one said normal hearts and one said museum. And so in a kind of anagram sense, I would try to take small shots from those labels to construct new sentences. So these two videos together, or films, they were shot with Super 8, kind of created a bifurcation between the sort of physical and the cognitive. And I like 2-channel pieces because they're really quite intriguing for an audience member who has to kind of go back and forth and reconcile two things together, not unlike the halves of the brain. So maybe I'll just show, there's no sound for this, so you won't hear sound, but again, it feels like a broadcast from another universe as this character who you never quite get to see except for their arm, their feet, etc. On one half tries to test the limitations of their body, and on the right tries to test the limitations of their cognitive ability for making sentences. So they're kind of games, they're playful, but hopefully when people have seen this, they've engaged with it on a playful level. And that, again, like those autopsy tools, is a nice strategy for getting them to think about the larger conversation, which is often difficult to talk about. So for the sake of time, I'll just sort of let this play for another couple seconds here, and then I'll move on to the last piece. Once the person who I was sort of reporting to in the morgue, his name was Aristotle, which I always found really quite wonderful. And he came in once and he was like, just said, what are you doing? What's going on? So that's yeah, there's Normal Hearts. So Normal Hearts Museum. And then last but not least, I suppose, and let's see if I can just set this. I believe I want to share the computer sound when I play this. Once I just had the opportunity, someone gave me a sort of a waterproof disposable camera, the kind of thing you take to a beach and photograph, in the waves. And the kid, that high schooler that was there, I don't know why, he decided to take a mouthful of water and spit it at me. So I said, all right, you do that to me, I'm going to get you back. I spat at him. And it became a little bit of a ridiculous game, but of course it did remind me again of this wonderful Bruce Nauman sculpture called, where he's sort of the body as a kind of fountain. So on the left is this kind of disposable, image taken with that camera. And I really did like the way that the water, a sort of a fluid, when photographed with a fast enough shutter speed, becomes sculptural. And of course, there's a tremendous history in the 1800s of kind of spectral ghost photography, which is quite popular now on YouTube. But people, would make an exposure, and halfway through the exposure, the photographer would walk behind the family and kind of go like this, and it would be recorded as a kind of blurry, phantasmagoric shape. Or they would do double printing with kind of ectoplasm coming out of people's mouths. And it all seems rather ridiculous that anyone would think this was serious. But again, in the context of the 1900, the 19th century, people didn't know any better, right? People didn't know photography. So at one point I did a piece, and this was a site-specific installation in the Sculpture Center in Queens, in a basement at the end of a hallway in the dark, was a piece called Phantom Fountain, which was in the context of the morgue, set up lights and a video camera and spat mouthfuls of water at this camera. It recorded that. And as I continued this process, the camera started to die. And eventually it stopped working. And I edited out the intermittent portions where I would, drinking water. So it's just this constant, incessant, flow of fluids, which in the context of a morgue or a hospital, fluids could be quite terrifying. So here, let's see if I can, and it goes on for about 1 minute and 40 seconds, so I'll just do a taste of it here. And let's see if we get towards the end. It just meets its own demise. So, the fact that was at the end of a long hallway with just this, ejaculation just kind of coming at you constantly was really, again, it had nothing to do, it was contextualized by the space, but there was, nothing perhaps exploitative about it aside from the use of the environment. So just in closing, I really love this quote by the scholar Philippe Arié, who said, it's blocked here partially by my window, but death has become unnameable and everything henceforth goes on as if neither I nor those who are dear to me are any longer mortal. Technically, we admit we might die, but really at heart, we feel we are non-mortals. And surprise, surprise, our life is not, as a result, gladdened when we experience these moments. And, in closing, I sort of feel that I ultimately didn't find out anything about life and death over all those years. But boy, what a fascinating place. I didn't have any kind of tremendous insight, but every time I went back, there was something new, interesting, and the context ultimately made me that much more aware of my own self. And of course, I then walked both of my parents individually through the whole aging process and hospice and death and after. And I, of course, have my own son, and I'm sort of, in that next stage, and I'm getting older myself. So it's sort of, I look back at this time, it's really, I see this person who's trying to understand, which is quite nice to look back. So thank you, Dror, for the opportunity.
Thank you. It was marvelous.
Today,
and I'm so happy that we found a common point with Dror. You're both spitting. I'm very honored to welcome two spitting artists. And I just wanted you to know that when I met Amir the first time, it was Amir Cohen sitting next to me, my colleague, and he designed the catalog for the Tel Aviv Museum for Serrano. André Serrano. And once I saw the bodies that you're talking, of course, I'm not talking about the operation of Rembrandt, which was like talking about long time before, the observation of the operation of Rembrandt. But at the end, I think that it's funny. In the last session, I was asking the architect, which I interviewed, whether he believed about the definition of breathing building. Like he talked about the skin, like the surface of the building, and we were discussing the meaning of breathing buildings. And now, after your presentation, a long time, I saw that it's all the time in between life and death. This is the way that I saw your approach, and I think that it's there was something very nice when you mentioned the age. Your position nowadays, like in comparative, in a way with the past, like the time that you created it, because I feel that in every stage of our age, we observe things in a way differently. That's what I feel. And because when you show the tools, for me, it was a language. It was almost a notes. Maybe it was a kind of a screen notes. This, whatever, it reminds me, hair, nails, everything is somehow connected to the skin. And when I saw the road, the line with the tools, it reminded me a kind of almost a new industrial skin description. It was very interesting when I saw it. So I think that you brought to the debate here some very different aspects. And Amir, I wanted to ask you, because when I saw the head in Stephan's work, it reminded me the body part of Serrano, which were in one way were disgusting, like when you think about it in Museum on the Wall, like what he said. But on the other hand, it was amazing. It was so fantastic experience. So
even though the series of Serrano called the morgue, what he has done is isolate the object from the surrounding of the actual morgue. So this is exactly what you say. It become kind of a Renaissance environment to the object. This is one thing. And one comment to what you said about the tools, Stephan's work, for me as a visual communicator, I see the semiotics that involved with the object, if I may say this way. It's like sign that the object himself, the tools himself, are like the alphabet, like the ABC, ABC of the thing, and find it very, very interesting in this way as part of the index of the work.
But the dichotomic way, the way that Stephan placed it in two rows also brought another meaning. Like when you take it to the so-called art presentation, it was like almost for me a sculpture of a head with a stand that we prepared to install it. There was a kind of two languages. And I really liked it. It was very, Stephan, I don't know if you were aware to it, but for me it was it was almost complementary, the rows, the lines.
Sure. Well, I generally am not interested, at least with this type of work, of showing a kind of fine art piece of a singular image. And when you break things down into the grid, it speaks a language of sort of more science and comparative situations. Yeah. And it contextualizes things. But, you know, for those of you that are in Venice, I mean, you just walk down the street and go into any Duomo, and there's going to be a relic of some saint, a piece of a body, a fingernail, a knuckle bone, kind of hidden up somewhere, or in the ossuary. So it's odd because it's sort of both fetishized. I guess if it has the right provenance, it's fetishized because it comes from a saint. But if it's from the realm of normal humans, it, you know, goes in the ground or becomes burned. So it's all about context, isn't it, on some level?
True.
If I may, the context to me, I was very disturbed because to me, morgue is a sort of a temple. This is where these several people end their biological being, and while they are there, the living ones surrounding them try to decipher the truth. What happened to them? This is why they are being dissected, in order to understand what happened, why that disaster happened and they lost their life. And doing different interventions, such a temple, to me, it was very disturbing, which brings us back to the issues that raised by Dror about ethical issues. Now, I'm not saying, not for me, Stephan, I'm not saying that what you showed us and what you have done back in those days is unethical. I'm just saying it is disturbing and merits some, at least to me, it merits introspection. Why do I feel that way? And should I explore it or just...
No, it is an issue. I totally agree with you. It is an issue. When we had the bodies exhibition, it was raised. Do you remember?
Yes.
The Chinese bodies, it was raised a lot. It is an issue. And Stephan, I don't know what you think about it, because...
So I just want to complete that issue, I think, also bothered the people back in the Renaissance times,
right?
Since the display, the first recorded displays of anatomical dissection actually used flayed bodies. So sort of the removal of the skin sort of enabled some sort of dehumanizing the sample, so you could observe it in a more scientific way or artistic way to study the anatomy for artwork, and we dissociated ourselves from the human existence. So perhaps nowadays, suppose we want to take similar materials or experiences to the museum, by some sort of a flaying process or metaphorical flaying, we'll be able to digest it and do it more easily.
Yeah, Yehuda, I don't disagree with you. I think that there are ethical issues, and fortunately that I kept contemporaneous journals during this whole process. And it's interesting when I look back at them, the questioning of, you know, should I be here? What does this mean? As I walk in, it's shocking. After 3 months, it was not quite so shocking.
Yeah.
And I that's of course why I've never really shown perhaps much. I mean, in slide talks, yes, where I could speak about the process and the journey and my conflicting feelings depending on what stage I was at in the whole process. And I think it's valid. And I don't know that something like this would be as easily accomplished today because everything is so inflammatory. It would just, you know, this is not going on Instagram or anything like that, right? It's not for that kind of consumption. But I walked in on day one thinking, like what you just said, that this is a temple. And at many different points, I strayed to the opposite side of the world in regards to that statement, and then came back and felt it once again, depending on the day and what I encountered. So at one moment, I could be in the other room, perhaps having a slice of pizza while something was going on, and be completely not even phased. And then again, I would find something. Maybe it was a card in the bundle from a grandchild to their grandparent, and then suddenly it would become a temple again. And so I think it's quite interesting that a place which is not changing, it is a static place, what's coming in is changing, can for me suddenly shift back and forth between a very clinical, cold workplace and a very deeply meaningful and personal and human temple, as you say. So yeah, there's a continuum.
Just cold and clinical are not necessarily the same. Sometimes you can be clinical and very warm and heartfelt.
Yeah.
You know, one place that in which you could show and discuss those works is pathology museums. Some museums, pathology museums in the world, have an art and science programs. So perhaps, and the access to those museums is selective and limited. So sometimes they conduct their art and science events that might be suitable to further discuss those issues.
I see a window of opportunity once my kid becomes 15. Thank you for the suggestion. That's excellent. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shall we move now to another? Nurit Harel will present a talk about skin humidity. And since we are dealing overall with remodeling, then perhaps skin humidity, which is more complicated than at least I thought, might be of interest. So let's watch that recorded presentation.
Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us to the talk about the skin moisture. My name is Nurit Harel. I'm from the industry and also a scientist, and today we'll talk about the science and why the water are so important, or actually the water balance is so important for our skin, and how the skin maintain this balance. So when we are talking about water, this is the molecular, a dynamic water molecule which has two hydrogen and one oxygen. There is some electric pole in between them, and they all the time have some dynamic dance between them. There are three molecules all the time moving. If you're looking on a glass of water, the molecules inside are dancing all the time and coming together and separate and coming together with another molecule, and there is dynamic movement in the water all the time. They are not really charged with positive, completely positive ion or positive and negative ion, but they have a little dipole, a little charge at the end, which make them come together like a very light magnet, the minus to the plus. It's called hydrogen bond, that weak, relatively weak, and very important for the water property. And what are the molecular property? We are still talking now about the water itself, nothing with our body. So the polarity, the water molecules are polar, meaning they have a positive and negative end, allowing them to attract different molecules. They have high specific heat, and this is very important. To heat water, you have to use a lot of energy. It's not easy to heat them, and it's not very easy to cool them. So in our body, they're keeping our temperature in balance. You have to, when you are sick, you know the temperature are going higher, you have to invent or to use a lot of energy to change the balance of the temperature of the water. They are universal solvents. They can dissolve many ingredients of the water. Actually, they have high density. The high density meaning they are crowded molecules. It's not very easy to dense water. If you want to try to make the water in your glass to a smaller volume, you have to have a lot of energy to do that, and it's not easy, and it's very important to the body because it's keep the shape of our cells, so they will want to be condensed easily. They have high surface tension, and they can balance the pH. This is just the water molecule in chemistry everywhere, not just in our body, the property of the water. What are the rules in our cell? As I just started to mention, and I hope by the end of the talk you will understand that it's very complex and deep, the water is essential to proper function and structure of the cell. It's play a crucial role in our hydration, the cell hydration. Imagine a ball like the ball in the picture on the right that have a lot of life inside of it. If I will take it out and shrink it, nothing could move inside and it will not be able to function. In the cell, we have many enzyme and protein, and think that, imagine them like a small machine that have to work properly. If they will not have the space and the area and the volume around them, they cannot move. The cycle will not move, nothing will happen. We need the volume of the cell, so they keep the cell in hydration. Because they are very good solvent, they enable nutrient transport and easy. We'll talk about chemical reaction a little bit later. And as I said before, very, very important is the regulation of the temperature, because if the temperature change, the protein are changed, the three-dimension structure of the protein is changed. Imagine that when you are boiling an egg, the structure of the protein inside are changing. That's why it becomes hard-boiled egg. So if it change in the structure, it will be malfunction. So the temperature regulation is very, very important for our health and skin function. Another very important rule of the water in the cell respiration and actually in the energy production in our body. We understand everything needs energy or fuel to work. If I want to speak now, if I want to move my hand, it's like my car needs the fuel. I need an energy that my body is producing it. And actually the water have a pivotal role in the production of the ATP, which is our fuel, the body fuel. And without the water, the cell cannot efficiently generate energy. It's also involved in electron transfer chain and also in the solvation of some of the ingredients which are involved in the production of this fuel. So without water, we cannot produce efficient energy. And when people are getting are dried because they didn't drink enough, they are very weak because they cannot generate energy efficiency. One of the reasons. There are some other reasons, other imbalances. As we know, most of our body is based, the process in the body are enzymes which process in the cell, and they have to be in a specific three-dimensional structure. So the substrate, which is coming into, if you look on the right side, so you see a substrate, have to be linked directly to the place in the enzyme. So for example, in this case, this red dot can go out or go in. It doesn't matter. There are many different enzymes with different activities, but it's like a key and a lock. You have to be precise in the three-dimensional process, and water is essential for this enzyme to act. It's facilitated to transfer the enzyme and their substrate to appropriate cellular location, and they regulate the pH. If we change the pH, again, it will not work properly. When we are talking about the skin, there are usually people talking about three levels of the skin. There is the epidermis, which is the most outer layer of the skin, the dermis, which is the middle layer of the skin where all the blood vessel, everything is happening over there. And there is the hypodermis, which is the lower layer of the skin, mainly fat cell, which connect the skin to our body and protect us. For me, if you listen to my previous or my next talk, I'm not sure which one will be the first, you know there is the fourth level, which is the microbiome, which is covering all our skin from the outside. It's the viruses, bacteria, and phage that covering all our skin and have interaction with us. But I will go to the traditional more definition. So we have 3 levels in the skin, the epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis. Water reservoirs are present in all skin layers, and there are different components maintaining the water balance in each layer. So we have the outer layer, the epidermis, we have the dermis and hypodermis, and in each one, the balance of the water is really important for the function of that layer. So if we are talking about the epidermis, the outmost outer layer of the skin, what is the role actually of this layer? First of all, to prevent harmful things to go into our body, for example, harmful bacteria, pathogens, or to prevent cracks or cuts in our skin. And we can say it's like a brick and mortar. The bricks are the flattened cells that you see on the upper layer, and in between them there is like the mortar, which is the intercellular matrix, which hold them together. And in the upper layer, you see healthy skin. When someone comes and some bacteria, fungi, allergen, anything, try to penetrate the skin, it will not able because the wall is strong and full. But where we are lack of water, the cell does not stick together. The extracellular matrix does not stick them together as good. And then pathogen, allergen, and other things can penetrate into our skin. So the function is really important here, and we have to keep it inside. To do that, I'm not going to go all over of this, but you have to understand that all these factors are involved only in the water balance in the skin. So we're starting from natural moisturizing factor. It's actually molecule that can hold in the water molecule inside the bond them back inside and prevent them from evaporating out from the skin. There are glycan, filaggrin, enzyme, the blood vessel. I'm just reading this list so you understand that chronocyte, aquaporin, enzyme, different enzyme, lipids, ceramide, hyaluronic acid, extra. All of these have to work together to keep the water balance in our skin. So nature will not develop so many methods, which some of them are like first tier and some of them are second tier, but all of them are keeping our water balance in the body if it wasn't that important as we expected. So if we see it's so complex to keep the water balance and all of that involved, let's see what really the role of the water in each level of our skin. So if we talk again about the epidermis, the most upper layer of the skin, the layer that we can see actually when we are looking on our skin, water is crucial for maintaining proper cell structure function within the outmost layer of the skin, ensuring its resilience and flexibility. The flexibility is also something which is very important for the skin because you don't want it to be too tight because then it can be injured easily. In the second level, in the most lower level of the skin, which is the dermis, over there are all the blood vessels, the hair follicle, everything is happening there, the collagen, the elasticity, everything is coming from this layer. It contributes to elasticity and firmness of the skin within the dermal layer, supporting collagen and elastin production as well. The blood vessels as well are going there, and they are very important for the water balance because water can be extracted from them outside to the skin and also go inside if we have like inflammation or something like that. The hypodermis, which is the most lower level of the skin, which sometimes people call it only fat cells, but they are not only fat cells. it provides like cushioning. It's like a cushion when we are walking on it, so it's like balancing the tension. And also there is the fourth level, of course, which is not formal fourth level, only in my talk, which is the microbiome, which will be on top of the skin, which is not represented in this illustration. The proper hydration foster an environment that supports rich and balanced skin microbiome, which is very important for our skin health. So what do we benefit from balanced skin moisture? So function. First of all, the water is essential for maintaining skin elasticity, barrier function, and overall health by regulating temperature and aiding the nutrition delivery and facilitating waste removal. So first of all, water balance is important for skin functioning. Second, for protection, when a well-hydrated skin barrier protects against environment aggressors. The texture, I know it's not very scientific to talk, but we like to have a nice texture of the skin, smooth skin, hydrated skin, is soft, supple, and smooth to touch. And the appearance also is more radiant and well appearing. But I must say that people always want to have a baby skin. It's not just they want that for the beauty, it's also good for the health, because well-hydrated skin and undamaged skin is also healthier skin. So water reservoir in the skin through life stage is changing. When we are infant, skin is naturally hydrated and plump. You don't see unless they have some skin disorder, babies that need to use the moisturizer cream. They have a very high content of water, they can hold it, and it's very good. During the adulthood, the skin maintains a healthy balance of water and lipid, but we are start losing some of the lipid, and then there is more water evaporation, and then we're getting to the dry skin. And the water content decrease, leading to thinner and drier skin. And if we are talking a bit from the practical use, if you look on the moisturizing cream for people around their 40s, it will be much more lighter than for people around their 80s, because in the 80s they lose their lipid and you have to remain their skin barrier. The water from the inside will not evaporate outside. During the 40s, most of the people, I forgot my 40s already, have good lipids and barrier skin as well. What influences the skin hydration? So as we said before, the age, the weather. If we are in a cold weather or dry weather, it's worse than skin dryness. So we have to use more moisturizer to keep it. Sun exposure, excessive sun exposure can damage the skin and cause dryness. Of course, we can see it immediately when we come back from the beach, but the accumulated damage will be shown maybe 10, 20, 40 years later. Excessive washing. Actually, if we wash the skin with hot water frequently with soaps, then we make it more and more dry. Hair condition, of course, and lifestyle. Drinking water. If we drink water, we will have more water in our whole body balance, and some of it will get also to our skin. Smoking, alcohol, and of course, this can unbalance the skin hydration balance. So when we are talking in the professional xeriosis or xeroderma, which is mean actually dry skin, what will we see? We said we will see change in the skin texture. It will be itching. We might have mild to severe peeling, flaking, cracks, fine line, redness, and changes in skin color and tone. This is the results of skin dryness. And as I said before, the balance of the water is so important. The nature developed over maybe 20 or 30 mechanisms to keep it correctly in the skin. Some health conditions that leading to dryness, there are some diseases like atopic dermatitis, psoriasis, eczema, scabies. There are systemic diseases. This is topical disease I talked before, and there are systemic disease like kidney disease, hypothyroidism, and others. Sometimes when we take medication, usually the pharmacist or the doctor will not tell us, but we will find out that suddenly our skin is more dry, but we didn't take anything with the skin, like medication from retinoids medication, diuretic, blood pressure medication, statin, and other treatment. Of course, this is not the whole list of everything, just samples that I wanted to highlight, that the skin moisturizing or hydration is connected to many parameters in our body and our behavior. So how can we treat dry? If we don't have dry skin, so we are happy, we don't have to do anything, of course. But if we have dry skin, what can we do? Of course, we can, first of all, drink plenty of water. We can use topical preparation, like any lotion or skin hydration. It depends, as I said, on the age, if you want it more lightly or more heavy, what we call it's like, imagine like a Vaseline, which is the heaviest skin hydration option. It doesn't have any water in it, but it closes the skin and prevent evaporation of water from the skin outside, so the water are kept inside. But if that the skin dryness, of course, doesn't improve, with home treatment, it's recommended to refer to doctor to diagnose the cause of the treat, because we saw that there are so many reasons for skin dryness, so there are many different treatments for that, because different cause will be based on different mechanism in the skin, so we have to repair different things in the skin. And then we have to do a tailored treatment are essential for addressing the diverse cause of the skin. Sorry for double addressing. And just I want to give some sample. This is from my own company, but it's also from other company, but here I'm very familiar with the different mechanism. So if you are talking on the foot, on the foot and on the dry skin on the foot, you have to use something with more heavy, not just have moisture, also keratolytic, which peel off by chemical way, very gentle chemical way, the dry skin, the outermost level of the dry skin, and give water inside. If you are coming back from the beach, moisture is one point, but you have a lot of free radical because you were exposed to sun radiation, which is high oxidative factor on our body. So it's better that in your moisturizing skin, you have also a lot of antioxidant that will neutralize the free radical to prevent longer results. Actually, it's accumulated result that we see in 10 or 10, 20, 30 years. We don't see them. Sometimes we come back home, the sunburn is recover and the skin is okay, and we think nothing happened. No, the skin unfortunately, remember in his DNA, and when enough accumulated damage to the DNA occur, we start to see the fine wrinkle and the heavy line, and then sometimes even cancer. So it's important to prevent this prolonged damage that even immediately we don't see. Of course, when we are talking about the eye is the very delicate skin, and it's, I think, behind the ear is the thinner skin that we have, but it's the second thinner skin in our body, and we have to use a thing which more gentle, which adapt to the eye as well. If we are talking about babies, usually when they are newborn, it's not like when they are a child. When they are 3 years old, they have the perfect skin. But when they are newborn, they don't have enough fat in their skin. So we need a more oily treatment, like a bath oil or something like that will cover in their skin with a slight level of oil. Of course, in your 40 or 30 or 50, there are different things that you want to change in your skin, so you have to adapt the treatment as well. And when you are old, more old, you can use moisturizers that have in them like lactic acid, alpha hydroxy acid, or something that will enhance the internal mechanism, our body mechanism, to work better to maintain the water balance. We have to work with the body. We are not taking the rule of the moisturizing of internal elements of our body. It's also that we are working with the internal elements, or either making them to work, but we are not replacing them anytime. So in conclusion, the skin is a complex and dynamic system in which maintaining the water balance is essential for its proper function. There are dozens of factors involved and different ways of influence the maintaining health and function and beautiful skin. As I was requested to interpret it maybe on art, I looked, what can I find about art and skin moisturizing or skin hydration? So the picture on the left is from Daphne Moria, and just to be fair with you, she's my sister, but it's so complex. I said, maybe it's just, I can see it, the complicity of the factors that involve in skin hydration and some blue water molecule there, and I'm sure that wasn't what she meant, but it's in the eye of the viewer, as you say, always about art. And I couldn't find a lot of work about hydration, artists who refer directly to hydration, skin hydration. So maybe one of you can explore it and find that for us. Thank you.